This is an instructional video from Rothenbuhler Engineering. In this segment, I will be going over the use of the shock tube initiators in conjunction with the remote firing device models from Rothenbuhler Engineering that utilizes the high energy remotes. There are three models here in front of me. On the left here is the model 1678, in the middle is the model 1680, and on my right here is the model 1685. I want to start out by briefly talking about the model 1678, and as you can see here, I have three different types of remotes that all work with this model set up in front of me here. This one here on the left is dedicated or designed specifically for doing shock tube and shock tube only, with the use of the Duke Pro tip on top of this. The middle one here is a standard electric remote, which is designed specifically for doing electric blasting caps. But with those two remotes, it's one or the other. You can't do both with them, which is where the high energy remote will come in handy. High energy remotes are capable of doing both shock tube, electric blasting caps, or other tools that require a high amount of energy, such as some of the electric breaches. Now with the model 1678, you have a choice between those three different versions of remotes. With the model 1680 and the model 1685, the remotes are all high energy with those. It's just the one type of remote with that system. Now briefly, what a shock tube initiator is for these high energy remotes, it will look very similar to an electric match. What you're seeing here is basically there's a bridge wire in here. The biggest difference is there is no chemical or pyrotechnic compounds in this that's going to make it a restricted or regulated item. So you don't have the issues with storage, transportation, shipping that you might have with other items like electric matches that'll have a classification restricting them. It's just they require a high amount of energy in order to get that bridge wire to crack or explode sufficiently enough to initiate shock tube. And I'll show you what it looks like on this model 1678, where I already have one installed. And I'm not sure how well this video is going to show the flame coming out of this, but it does have a pretty substantial flame when you do it. Firing. So pretty good crack that this has on it, and quite honestly, this is by far and away the most reliable means I've come across of doing shock tube, and I've played with lots of different means. So that's what a shock tube initiator looks like with nothing plugged into it. So when it comes time to actually fire the shock tube, how does that work? The end of these shock tube initiators has this little rubberized sheath or connection, much like the ones that will come in a roll of shock tube. And very simply, you just take one end of the shock tube and press it in. And like we always talk about with explosives, we want a good intimate contact to ensure effective or reliable initiation. Now I was able to get it pretty much all the way up against that, but later I'm going to demonstrate that even if you don't get it that close, how reliable the system is. The other thing I'll demonstrate here, since the controller already tipped over, I will go ahead and lay down the remote for this, that I already have a little bit of shock tube installed into this. I'm going to utilize my metal tray over here so that I don't scorch my table I'm working on. To also show you what happens, that when you fire the shock tube with this, typically it will eject out of the shock tube initiator, which makes it nice if you are, let's say, utilizing a pan disruptor or something. You don't have to worry about the pan disruptor flying back and dragging your remote with it. So I'm going to go ahead and arm this one. And if you've seen the other videos or played with these, when you arm them, flashing means the internal capacitors are charging. Once I get a solid light, that means that remote is armed and ready to go, and I will fire it. Okay, now firing shock tube. So as you can see, that went, and it ejected the shock tube after it fired it out. Now we'll demonstrate again, even though, again, it's highly recommended that whenever you're utilizing explosives, again, stick with that concept of good intimate contact. But again, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to kind of push the envelope a little bit of this where it doesn't have as good a contact as we might want. If you've ever experienced this, like when it's really, really cold, these things can be kind of hard. You can cut them if you needed to, or whatever the case may be to get in there. But let's say you couldn't get good contact. I'm barely going to put that thing in just enough to hold on to it. I'm going to set this other end in my table there. Let me go and arm this guy. Move this over where you can see it a little bit better. And hopefully the video will show that that shock tube is getting initiated. Firing. So again, not that I would recommend it, but I barely put that shock tube in there and it had no problem getting it to go. So that makes it a nice, reliable way of doing it.